Hello, welcome to the September 10th, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. I'm just going to do a quick audio test and we'll get started in just a moment. Make sure everything's coming through as expected. Okay, that all sounds fine. My name is Greg Undo. I'm the host for the live stream today. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. in the United States in Alexandria, Virginia. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you could just simply ask questions in the chat field. Realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner, I won't be able to keep up with the live questions, but we'll try to go through the questions chronologically and get through all the questions as completely and succinctly as possible. So I'll apologize in advance if we miss a question or two. So let me just see. I just want to make sure I saw a couple questions that were in already. Okay, so but we'll try to get through all the questions. If when asking a question, if you could specify which version of Cubase, whether it's like Cubase Elements 10.5 or Cubase Pro 11, or whether and what operating system you're currently on, that information sometimes is helpful. Just one quick note, we do have some workers at our house kind of putting a deck on today, so we may hear some hammering in the background. I'll apologize if that gets annoying. But it's kind of the opposite end of the house, so hopefully it won't be too bad. But if you hear some banging and rattling, also my wife is working directly above me, and she's on numerous conference calls throughout while we're doing our live stream, and my son will be coming home probably about with the last 30 minutes of the live stream, so there could be a chance of an interruption, but he'll probably want to go out and play. So just wanted to give a quick heads up with that. So, and also before we get started, just a couple of one other announcement is Steinberg just released Wavelab Pro 11 this week. So there will be Justin Perkins, I believe, will be doing a live seminar on it on the 15th. So September 15th, 5 days from today. So take a look for that. You can probably see the information if you go to youtube.com/Wavelab. But I just wanted to give everyone a heads up on that. A couple people want to thank. We have people that serve as moderators for the live stream. We usually have a very well-behaved group. But I want to thank Agent K and Jazz Dude for that. We also have... if you wanted to search for topics for live streams, we have the index. We should have that up late tonight or early tomorrow. I have a picnic to go to at my son's school, so maybe later tonight than usual. But if you wanted to search for index for any of the live streams that we've done, you could go to cubaseindex.com and you could thank Jan, who sets up that site. And it's a wonderful resource where you just almost type in questions. And we probably have almost, over 12,000 questions that you could search for there and be taken directly to the particular video. One other wonderful resource of information that you can also get is the Cubase Nation Discord, in addition to all the wonderful official Steinberg resources. So, and Jazz Dude's involved with that. So kudos to him for that. So let's go ahead and get started. So I see during a MIDI piano chord progression, intermittent single notes cut off shorter than the note value drawn in. On replay, it's fixed, then different notes have the same problem. What's happening? Okay. Okay, so I just wonder if it's going to be something... So I don't know kind of off the top of my head, but let me just we'll pull up a quick piano part here that we could look at. So I'm not sure if the notes are coming from the chord track or if it's just kind of MIDI notes here, like in an editor. So when I've seen stuff where notes can sometimes get cut off, I would look to see if maybe there were pedals that are involved. So if you wanted to just add a sustain, so say if we add another controller category here, and so now we could look at the sustain. So make sure that perhaps the sustain isn't getting turned, isn't a cause of that. Sometimes also if people are doing overdubs, if they're kind of drawing notes in, there could be a note, but maybe another note that is on top of the note that could be underneath. So if I just wanted to come here, we could have two notes basically on top of each other, and one may be cutting off. So I'm not sure if you're playing directly from a MIDI keyboard or if you're drawing notes in. And for some cases like this, if you actually go to the MIDI and look at it in the list editor, this may also kind of give you like an actual list of the different controllers and what could be going on with that. So maybe it's, sustain or something that you're not seeing. We could think of this as kind of being very granular, seeing every single event that may not be so apparent when we look at it in the key editor, and see if there's anything that kind of looks like that could be causing what you're describing. But nothing really kind of just pops out, off the top of my head for that particular scenario other than those things. But if you could let us know if you're doing it from a MIDI controller or if it's doing it from just drawing notes in or dragging it from a chord track. Okay, so we have a question from Jay from Connecticut. And also, if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And if this is your first live stream, let us know that as well. It's always great. Okay, so you see from, question, I wanted to potentially simplify feature request on root keys. Could we perhaps assign roots to arrangement sections? It may aid modulation strategies to link and request cross-reference chords. Okay, so I think that this is going to be with the chord pads. So I didn't know if it was with the arranger track or with chord pads. So let's say if I wanted to come here and... So I will just come over here to, let's say, our setup. So let's say roots to arrangement section. So let me just, I think we could also get to it from here, from the chord pad setup. So this is with the, here if we go, let's say to the player remote, so I'm not sure if this is, if you wanted to assign, maybe you could specify a little more, Jay. So on root notes, can we assign roots to arrangement sections? It may aid strategies. So maybe if you just go to the chord pads and go to the chord pad setup, and there's the different player options that you could do here, and you could assign MIDI learn or different subsections that you could just kind of define the MIDI notes. So let me know if that works for you. If not, maybe if you could rephrase the question. Sorry for misunderstanding on my part. All right, wonderful to see John Costigan from Kenosha and Uno from Finland, where he's saying it's a sauna, so where he's in a sauna. And we have Soren from Sweden. We have Jazz Dude from Germany. We have Thermonuclear Ore from Serbia with Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas. All right. We see that Jan is on. All right, and we have Randy Lee from Texas and Millard Brown from Pennsylvania. Okay, so we have a question. When I put an 808 sample on the sampler track and I tried to fade in a bit, it seems to fade with a grid. But if I have the grid turned off on a project and in the sampler track window, how not to? Okay, so let me just come over here. I think I have a project that may work with this. Okay, so let's say if I have this particular, just adjust my controller here a little bit. Okay, so it just says so it seems to fade in with the grid, but if I have the grid turned off, all right. So let's say if I just wanted to do just a slight fade in here. So that doesn't necessarily seem to be tied to the grid. So I'm not sure if you're just doing the fade length, but let me just see if I could have that tied to the grid. But right now, as I'm doing this, it doesn't seem to be tied to the grid here. So let me know if this is where you're doing the fade in. So I could put it, very short. So let's say, okay, just kind of grab that little node there. So if I want it long, shorter. So here we're not tied to the grid at all. It's allowing me to kind of freely place the sampler grid wherever I want, but let me know if that's if you're trying it from a different way, and if not, maybe if you just wanted to just try to adjust just that particular point right there and see if that allows you to, but it doesn't seem to be locking to the grid here. All right, great to see Michael Pierce on the live stream. All right, we have Taylor from Pine Grove. Okay, so Taylor has a question about the chord tracks. So let me just get a particular project up here. Let's see if I have it in my recent. Yeah, okay. All right, so I'll just put a couple of chords in quickly. Okay, and let me just drag these down so we'll have just some block chords. Okay, so I'm going to, all right, so we'll just look at our chords here. Okay, so let's say I have new chords here, and I want to. So the question is, what is the difference between follow directly, analyze chord, and apply a known chord when following a chord track? Okay, so I'm going to choose to have this follow the chords. Okay, so let's just say follow directly. So I think that may kind of keep the same notes there, but just maybe follow. It looks like it, as we did this, that it'll just kind of move, maybe not change the chord, but follow the chords directly. But let's come over here and we'll say, shut this off, and we'll try the others. So say we'll synchronize and we'll do analyze chords. So it looks like that maybe just does. All right. Let's see what. So I think if we do apply a known chord, that will allow us to kind of set the root to it. So as we look at this particular note, so I don't probably have like a really good answer. I could do some more research on that, Taylor, but I think it's, if we wanted this to, let's just set one more time here. I'll just set it to off. So let's say we do chords. So if I just say follow directly, then that will automatically. So I think it could be like how the voicings will be managed. But I could see if I could get a better explanation for Tuesday's live stream. Sorry about that. Okay, so I see a question, Greg, on Cubase Pro 11 in generic remote control. Is there a specific list of control numbers to assign to Cubase functions, like track editor to assign to buttons for my Android remote control app? So if we go to your generic remote, here you could assign, the MIDI controller. So it's going to be, and whatever, we could think of this as being the MIDI CC number as we look at this. So at this point, we could just have, so this would be a MIDI channel 1, controller 94. And if it was a note message, we could just, come right over here. Now, the quickest thing to do is probably just click on learn and then move whatever particular function, move the button or hit the note. And we can see that as I, move, as soon as I hit something in MIDI here, that will automatically capture the incoming MIDI message. So, whether it's going to be a note or a controller, the easiest way is just to click on learn, and then you could assign any MIDI note, any controller value directly there. So if you have the remote control on Android, it would be just like incoming MIDI data, and you could just capture it right there. So it could be any MIDI note, or any type of controller, aftertouch, poly pressure, program changes, etc. So different MIDI messages right there. Okay, so we have a question. Hello, there used to be such a function, select the first event, then shift select the last to select the range. Why doesn't it work anymore? So let's go ahead and take a quick look. Okay, so let's see if we can. Let's say I come here. So I don't remember that particular function. Not that it doesn't exist. So let's just say here, I'll move some of these notes. So I don't remember that particular function. Let's say if I just come here. So I'm not sure if that was a function in Cubase. Maybe other people could talk. But I know if you just like, if you're going to do it kind of on the same pitch, because there isn't necessarily like a range selection tool in the MIDI key editor. But let's take a look maybe in the in-place editor. That function may exist. So let me just... So it looks like we could select a range, but I wasn't familiar with that particular function to select the shift. I know that if it's on the same pitch, that you could just kind of shift, double click, and I would select all of the same pitch. But I don't remember like the shift key selecting it, but I could be mistaken. All right, we have Laura Burton checking in from North Yorkshire. Thanks for joining us. All right, and we have Matthias Kanzi. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, but from Germany on his first live stream. All right, we have Ahmed from Tunisia. All right, so going through. Okay, so I have a question. I'd like to do it. I'd like to do the fade really short, just so don't click. But it does too much because it automatically locked to the grid about the 808 sampler. So when we go back to the sampler track, let me know if if I did it differently than you did. Okay, so we just see, hi Greg, the sampler track has been a game changer for me in terms of productivity. Is it possible to set the filter cutoff on the sampler to velocity? So let's come over here. I'll activate this project. So I don't know way off the top of my head to just do that based on velocity. But maybe if we set it up with the LFO, so let me just. So I don't know way off the top of my head to do it, but I could play around with it a little more, Laura. If you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. Just see if there's different shapes. But I can do some more research if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, so I have a question from Norton Wade. Hey, Greg from Augusta. Windows 10, all right, i5, 32 gigs of RAM, Cubase 11, Wavelab 6, both work great by themselves, but neither will work with the other open. It seems like licensing both on the USB, on the USB fob. Any hints? So make sure that when you're, because I think it came later, that it would allow you to kind of share but one thing that I would do if you're using the same audio interface between the two, because obviously they're like 12 years apart or so in age, but make sure that when you go to the audio connections here, or not the audio connections, but if you go to the studio setup and we go directly to the audio system, that you could just release the ASIO driver when application is in the background, that is checked. But if I'm here, I could play this and open up, Wavelab. And let's, just say as I'm here, I could open this up and play back and forth, but it could be just a simple, maybe that the audio interface isn't set to share, and there's some more hooks as to kind of match the older versions, the current versions of Wavelab to share audio drivers more effectively, but that may not go back to Wavelab 6. Okay, so we see clarifications from Jay about the arrangers. Okay, so it was about arranger tracks. I'd like to use a arranger track to assign root keys. Each section having a separate root key could direct chord, pads, piano rolls, etc. Linking arrangement could allow each linked arrangement section to provide borrowed keys for transitioning, modulating section, and help sketch out more complex arrangements for noobs. Okay, so if you wanted to, if we had different, so if you wanted to trigger the arranger track events based on, so if you wanted to trigger the arranger tracks, based on Midi, what you could do is do this in the arranger track and through the generic remote. So at this point, if we go to the generic remote, So we go to studio setup, and we'll see our generic remote that we could actually just trigger. So let's say I want this particular MIDI note, and we want this to go to command, and then we could go to arranger, and then you could just go to different arranger events. So let's say if I wanted to go here, let's do a quick learn function, and I wanted this to go to command arranger, and at this point we can say go to arranger 2. So now when I come over here, hit apply, I could, while we're playing, I could just kind of navigate between my different arranger chains. So you could, so if that'll help you, Jay, if you have everything set up and you wanted just a MIDI note message to trigger the different arranger chains, you could do that again through the generic remote. Let me know if that works for you. So we see from Dallas LaRusie, a alignment tool best used on vocals or instruments. Every time I use it, it seems to make things worse. Thanks. It's really, I think the intent, I've used it on both successfully. And obviously, you know, it has to kind of be within kind of the same ballpark, but I'll show you just a quick example here of it in action. So let's say I have background vocals here that are so, and even if we kind of look at this visually, we can notice that these will be rhythmically out. So I could select one of the files here. Let's go to our alignment. And then I could just say, let's add that as our reference, and I could add multiple events as targets and then just align the audio. So now if we just want to listen to it, you know. So that way you could do that quite easily and just kind of work like that. But, you know, if something is like, you know, a couple beats out that may not give the results, it sometimes, you know, it has to kind of be within the ballpark to kind of make sense for it to work. All right, so let's move on to next question. Thanks for the question, Dallas. All right. Okay, so we see Greg Hallian 6 program layers, zones, slices, create zones from a sample, but recording with Auto Next, it doesn't need a zone. Please help the understanding of layers and zones in Hallian 6. Let's go take a quick look. Okay, and I'll just find some. Okay, so, you know, you can have kind of the program And then, within this, we could have, different layers and zones. So here we could have kind of all of our different samples that will be laid out. So we could think of, layer, like the program is kind of the highest level. And then at that point, we could say, okay, we're going to have, different layers that could, make up that sound. And then if we wanted to treat those a little, to treat different elements, maybe with different effects, or, if we wanted to have different effects on this zone, here, we could just simply add that there. Now, when you're working with the sliced audio, it could still be the same initial audio file, like if we look at it in the sample editor, but only treating it working with the individual slice, but it's still referencing the entire audio file. And I think that's, what you can kind of work with there. So, we could think of, maybe if we were to think of it, okay, we could have all these kind of, layered, and we could think of, maybe on a macro level, we could think of layers as being kind of more horizontal, where you could have the samples here kind of layered together, or they could be switched. And we could think of zones as maybe different keys that the different samples could be spread across. All right, wonderful to see Sir Robert on the live stream. And Michael Pearson, others want people to hit the like button. So if you learned something, hit the like button. Okay, so you see I have money to buy Cubase, but I don't have PayPal or MasterCard, etc. in my country to pay. I need solution. I'm a producer since 2012. So there's probably, I'm not sure where you're, let's see, I think Ahmed mentioned where he was previously. Let me just see if I could find it. See if it's still available in my chat. But, Steinberg products are still sold through local dealers as well. So I'm sure that, just see if I could find, so, if you don't have PayPal or MasterCard, you could just simply go to a local dealer as well. So, we still have lots of people to buy software from their dealers. So you're not limited to only buying it on the Steinberg website or, electronically. You can still do it through dealers as well. All right. So we see question. Let me just, my discussion field just jumped on me. So it says we have a question. How long does it take to implement the support of the new Wavelab 11 version in Cubase 11? So I'm not sure if there's like particular features that you want or what exact support, or if there's just different features. So obviously, we came out with Cubase 11 last year. So, towards the end of last year. So, I'm sure that there's, lots of people working really hard on new features. But when you say implement the support of Wavelab 11, but if I'm directly here, I could just say, I haven't tried this yet. I just got my Wavelab license. But if I come here, I could just export directly into Wavelab Pro 11 already, even with the older version. But if there's a particular function or feature that you want to see, they are two different programs with two different purposes. But obviously there could be some overlap in functionality that's nice. All right, great to see Daryl from Oakland on the live stream. All right, so we have a question from Jan. So Groove Agent 5 follow-up question. What is the benefit of using multi-agent versus multi-tracks loaded with Groove Agent 5? Can Greg help me so I can explain the benefits so I can tell my friends? Okay, so if we have, just one instance of Groove Agent, the full, so why run multiple agents within one particular one particular instance of Groove Agent versus 4 instances of Groove Agent SE. So if you're doing a lot with the patterns, this is where it can make kind of a big difference. So one of the things is, as we look at patterns, we could have the patterns kind of interact with each other. So, and of course, if I'm doing different, so let's say, okay, I just wanted to have, and I'll just do a quick kind of MPC. Okay, so when we want to deal with different patterns. So one, it's kind of sometimes nice if you're dealing with drums not to have 4 different drum programs open that you're kind of working with. And, if we actually want to come over here, when we go into the patterns, we could go to the pattern overview. So this way I could actually kind of do live choices and have this pattern playback. So we could turn off kind of the global pattern mode. So as we're kind of playing, I could just say, okay, I want this particular pattern, and now I want this pattern on this agent. So as we just kind of come over here, I could mix and match these different patterns, or if I wanted these patterns all to be the same for performances. So now I can say, okay, I want to switch this pattern, or these could all be kind of locked together or completely independent of each other. So that's kind of, and I think also when you're dealing with, the different patterns that you're working with here, so you could bring in and out different patterns. So at this point, I could just bring in and out and mix and match different patterns together, as opposed to working with 4 different tracks and trying to do that. I could do this all from one unified window. So that's, some of the big advantages of dealing with, multiple agents within a single instance. It's just a little cleaner. And I think if you had to have 3 different groove agents open and switch between the patterns for them to interact with each other, that you probably wouldn't do it. And you'd probably say, it's good enough, when it might not be the best thing for the music. But having multiple agents with their independent patterns set, so you could just say, okay, I wanted this on that, and try out different ideas quickly. That's where I think the advantage of having a multi agents loaded in the full groove agent makes a lot of sense. Okay, just reading through. Okay, so we see Agent K doing some moderation here for us. Thank you. Okay, going through more comments. So thanks for all the great questions. All right, great to have Matt from London on the live stream. Thanks for joining us. Okay. So just see a question. And this was kind of directed at, I think, Dexter. Can you say me how to drag and drop third-party presets in Cubase as we do in FL Studio? So, any preset that you have, you could just come over here with, so let's say if I just go to, I don't have many third-party. I think I have a synth here. I'm not sure if it has presets or not, but any instrument that you have, you can just kind of come right over here, say, okay, I just want it to come over here, let's say to retrolog, and this works the same way for third party. But I could just say, okay, I just wanted these particular instruments, and you can just kind of drag and drop directly onto and create new instruments. So if you wanted to do that, or if you wanted to take a particular instrument like we have here and just say, I think we could even just on the track, just take the preset and just have that preset change if you just drag the preset directly on the track. But if there's something else, I know it wasn't addressed to me, but let me know if that makes sense. So you see Dexter saying he may update another program or switch lanes. So I think if you switch to Cubase, you'll be in great shape. Okay, please save me. I can't really find out third-party preset files inside Media Bay. So, it could depend on if they're, VST2 or VST3 plugins. So sometimes plugins will have their own plugin preset format that is not read by Cubase. It's only internal to that particular plugin. But again, you can just, and even if you wanted to make track presets, you could, just come over here so you can see all like VST3 presets for instruments. So if you wanted to just kind of do that, I don't really have a lot of third-party presets here, but it really can make a difference if it's a VST2 or VST3 plugin. So if you could let us know if there are if the plugins that you're trying to find the presets for are VST2 or VST3. Okay, so I just see from Ahmed, I don't have a dealer in my country. So if you could remind me just, what country you're in again, that would be helpful. I might be able to direct you somewhere. So if you don't have a dealer, maybe depending on what country you're in, we may be able to find a dealer for you or someone that could sell to you. So if you needed to pay cash or do something like that. All right, so I just see how works the USB-E licenser. I have Cubase Elements, and I wanted to upgrade, but I don't know how works the USB-E licenser. So the USB-E licenser is just a mechanism to hold licenses. So now the USB-E licenser is required for some programs like Cubase Artist and Cubase Pro, where when we have and Cubase Elements can run on something called a soft E licenser. So some of the programs like Dorico, I think Wavelab Elements, Cubase Elements can run on a soft E licenser, and that's where the license is just stored on your particular computer. So if you want to upgrade, you would basically just, if you wanted to upgrade, let's say from Cubase Elements to Cubase Pro, you would just simply, purchase the USB-E licenser, because that's required to run Cubase Artist or Pro, and then basically you drag the license from the E licenser program. So you would just come over here. So you have the E licenser program, which does the license management. You would take your soft E license, so if you have any, and just drag it to your USB E licenser. Once it's on your USB E licenser, you upgrade, and it'll ask you to find your Cubase Elements license, and then you would just come right here. You'd enter the activation code. It's then going to say find your Cubase Elements license. You select your Cubase Elements, and then you would upgrade. And then the license is going to be stored on a USB-E licenser, and that could be moved from any computer. So, okay, so just see, I'm looking support of Wavelab 11 within Cubase 11. So, there are like two different programs, but, a lot of it is you could just say, edit in Wavelab, and, you could just simply come right over here. So I'm not sure if that's tied in. I may have to kind of just set a preference, but you could do audio editing between Wavelab and Cubase. I'm not sure if that is kind of working in, let's say, set up editor preferences. So I'm not sure if that is, I could do some, I could check to see I just got my, so I saw where it opened up 10 on my end. So I'm not sure if that link is working 11, or I don't have it configured yet, but let me know if that's what you want to do. Okay, so we have a question. How do you use different time signatures in one song? Say 3/4 for 16 bars and 4/4 for the next bars. So really all you have to do is we could just come right here. We're going to add a signature track. So at this point, I could just say at this point, starting at measure 25, I want this to be, and I'll just type in 3/4. And then starting right here, I want that to be 4/4. I want this to be 7/8. And then you just want to make sure that you have the, when we do this, that you have, and if you wanted to just, have the metronome active. And, one of the cool things is, let's say if I go to 7/8 right here in the middle, and then I could actually just double click. And if you wanted to change like metronome patterns, you could do stuff like that as well, and have different metronome patterns for different meters. But just add a signature track. And if you're on a older version of Cubase, you might have to go to to the tempo track. So let me see if it's under. So I think if you hit Shift T or Control T, And then, so if you're in like Cubase Elements, you could now just come over here, and at the top, you'd see the time signature track, and then you could just drop in different meter changes right there. All right, so we have Johnny Allen checking in from the Bay Area. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we just see a question: is the USB is digital? I think this is with the USB E licenser. Let me just find that spot. Is it something digital? So the USB E licenser, is a physical USB device that holds the license. So, it holds digital information. So it's digital in that sense, but it is a physical USB key that needs to be connected to your computer. All right, so we see Kumoki says, hello, everyone. Happy I can finally join in. Thanks for joining us. All right. So I just see, I think this is maybe with the E licenser. Says, thank you, bro. If they have this in Brazil too, so you could definitely get the USB E licenser worldwide. We have lots of users in Brazil. All right, so just see as explanation in the past, you could open up Wavelab and Cubase as an internal window within the application. ARA2 support, ARA2 support. So it wasn't ARA2 support; it was just a particular preference. But so it should be when you come here. So I could play around with it after, but there's a edit in Wavelab, and I may just have to switch a preference to get it. So to see if that works in 11, but try selecting the event, but it wasn't handled through ARA2. So. All right, so we see a question. Is there a way to set the pan controls back to stereo without removing the 5.1 the 5.1 track that caused it to switch? Once you have kind of an element that's going to be in 5.1 like you see here, we can still do the panning in stereo, even though this is a stereo track. But if there's a 5.1 or an immersive group or bus, you still have the panning modes will be the same, but it maybe just display differently. If you double click on the panner, you could open up kind of a large panner, but it's going to be like this if there is a particular if there is a particular surround element, but kind of really the functionality will be the same. All right, so we just see from Mr. Morpheus, can you explain stack recording, not just to comp parts into one, but so I could stack vocals and layers and drag into tracks? So I think the easiest way to do this is kind of maybe like a modified comping mode. So you can see this is pretty common for doing like, if you're doing stacked background vocals. So let's say if I just wanted to do a loop recording, so let me just turn my snap on. And let's say I was just recording. So one quick way of doing this is, let's say I just do the same thing over and over again, like a stacked background vocal. All right, so let's say we feel we have enough. I'm going to come here. So let's say we have all of these lanes, and these lanes will play back at once. So what I could do is I'm going to just select all of the lanes, right click, and say create tracks from lanes. And then I'll just grab the mute tool to come right there and unmute it. And then you could just have everything stacked directly from kind of like a quick vocal comp. So if you're just like, sitting by yourself and you're stacking background vocals, just do it as comps and then turn each of those into lanes and edit and tweak if necessary. Okay, so we see VK is checking in from Chennai. So my old boss was from, his family is from Chennai. Okay, so we see, is there an option to select a region and fill in material room tone from the clipboard just for the length of this selection? So let's say if I have, let's say this is my room tone here. So I think Wavelab has kind of a feature function for this, but let's say, I think that there's some functionality in the window for this, but let's see if we could do it inside of Cubase. So I know what a lot of people do is just kind of come here and just kind of drag it across. And see if there's maybe something in a project logical editor that we could set up. I don't think there is, but we'll take a quick look. Yes, I know a lot of people will just kind of will drag it out and then cut, but it may not like do the crossfades between different sections for room tones. But I know Wavelab has like a function for that specifically, but I could play around with it. I want to see if I could come up with something for Tuesday's live stream. All right, we have Teal checking in from Tacoma, Washington. It's a beautiful part of the country. All right, Tim Weinheimer helping his daughter move into college in Seattle. Okay, so we have a question. How can I open key/drum editor event on the center of the screen? All right, so we just go to something that had some Midi in it quickly. Okay, so say how we open in the center of the screen. So if you want it to come here, we could just say, okay, if I wanted the key editor kind of in the center of the screen, it's really, if it's just like the editor preference, so you could, if you wanted the key editor to be here in the center of the screen, it's really just when you go to your preferences and under editors, you could say double click opens in separate window or double click opens in lower zone. So let's say now if I say double click opens in my in a separate window and I double click, it's going to be directly in the center of the screen. So if I'm here, double click, it'll be in the center of the screen. Or you could choose just to, when you hit the keyboard shortcut, that will open. So let's say open editor commands, opens editors in Windows. So now if I just come here and hit Command E, that you could just simply have that kind of toggle back and forth between the two views, whether you open it with keyboard shortcut or whether you want to double click and see the editor in the center part of the screen. Okay, we see Kyle Kennedy just dropped in to give a quick like, so thanks. And all right. So I just see a question. Hi, Greg. If I have a Cubase Pro license, can I open Cubase Artist? If so, how? So generally with the Cubase Artist is basically, like when you have a Cubase Pro license, it is all of the features. If you have a Cubase Artist license, it's basically the Cubase Pro with certain features not enabled. So, but I don't know if you could, I don't know of a way to open up Cubase Artist with a regular e-licenser. There are some e-licensors that are used for dealers, and that would allow you to have a choice between opening up a Cubase Artist or a Cubase Pro. But I believe that if you have just, if you don't have one that's intended for dealer displays, that you could downgrade, but all the functionality would be the same. So if you need to open up Cubase Artist for a particular reason, I mean, the projects can interchange, but I don't know of a way to open up Cubase Artist if you have just a Cubase Pro license. All right, so we see from Sven Isaacson, speaking of licenses, will the new license scheme replace the e-licenser or be an alternative? In the 20 plus years I've used the e-licenser, I've never had one die on me. I can't say the same about drives. I believe it will be, I think Steinberg should be careful messing with perfection. So there's a lot of people kind of going through these. They haven't really, the only thing that I know of, and I'm asking these questions all the time as well in meetings, is, they've announced that it will be, the future will not be kind of USB e-licenser based. So I'm sure that as we have more information to share that they will, but, it's obviously a huge decision for the company. So, it's one that they're not taking lightly, and they're just, so they are, trying to figure out every possible scenario, and I'm, sharing different scenarios that they may not think of as well. All right. So as we have more information, then, it will, I will share it as soon as I have some. All right, so we had a question. Is Cubase designed to be used under Windows or Mac OS? What I mean is, do you lack some usability under one or another? So it's really the same, exactly the same. So it's written on kind of its own framework where it's, everything is kind of done for both platforms. So there's no real advantage. It's really a personal preference, whatever you choose. Okay, so we have a question. Greg, can you explain working with comp tracks with multiple takes to select the best part? Okay, so let's go ahead and set this up. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, so let's say if I'm here, I just will do a couple of takes. Okay, so now when I'm here, let's say I'll just go ahead and put these into a folder. I don't think I have to do that, but I'm going to, let's see if I need to group these. I'm just going to hit Control or Command G to group different ones. So let's say if I wanted to now open up the lanes for each of these, let me just. Okay, so if these are grouped together, so maybe at this point, let's say if I grab the hand tool, so let's say if I wanted to do this, so at this point I could just, treat these independently. So I could say, okay, I wanted that take on that instrument, this take on another instrument. So we could do that. Now, another method that I often do, so I prefer kind of lanes for single tracks like vocals or guitar solos. But if we come here to project, one of the things that if I'm doing multiple, different, if I'm doing, multiple tracks, I may often do, where I may just come here and say, okay, I want to select this particular. So I'll just say, from the project menu, we could just say, let's create, and we go to track versions. So let's say we create versions from lanes. And now I could just come here. So let's do this for this one. All right, so now I could come over here. Let's just hide these particular lanes. And then if I wanted to say, okay, I did multiple tracks, I could just say, okay, I wanted to take these and, switch to this take. And then we could just simply come over here and say, okay, so at this point, I could switch between multiple takes, just kind of using different track versions. So let's say if I wanted to kind of start from scratch again and do via track versions for multiple tracks, like if I'm doing like a whole band, that's generally what I will do. So let's just start from scratch. I'll add 3 audio tracks, 4 audio tracks. I will come here to say I record. Okay, and let's say that's going to be take 1, and then I will just say new version. So all that information is still there. So I'll just come here. Okay, and let's do another new version for all of these. And these will all kind of, if they're selected, all the track versions will work together. So, and then I could say, you know, for this one, they're all selected. I want them all to go to version 2, or I want these all to go to version 3, or I want this one to go to version 2, but the other ones to go to version 3. So, you know, for multi-track, you know, multiple parts, I would generally tend to use track versions as a personal preference. I think it was a little cleaner. Okay, so we see a question. No, it's kind of a basic feature, but would you explain how Cubase's sidechain works? I don't quite get it. All right, so sidechain, what that's going to allow you to do is to basically take one track and use that as the input for dynamics processing on another track. So I'll just revert this quickly. So it's and we often see this like in EDM music with like synth and like synth bass and drums, and like rock tracks, you'll often see that as well. So let's say I have just a quick, like a synth and a kick. So if I want to have the kick sound more prominent by almost like ducking this particular synth part, I could just go to its inserts and I'll just go to the compressor, and we see this little activate side chain. So I'm going to turn that on, and we see this with VST3 plugins. And what I want to do now is just to choose the input source. I'm going to choose this kick track, and we could choose multiple sources. So now is when this kick track comes in, that's going to trigger the compressor to basically change the dynamics of the original file. So as we come here, we'll listen. So now what we're hearing is the kick sounds more prominent because the other elements are ducking as soon as the kick actually comes in. And that's what sidechaining is used for. Okay, just reading through comments. All right, we see from More Than Conquer, Cubase is popular all over the face of this flat earth. Greetings from the Netherlands, and, you know, cheese and weed. All right, so. Okay, so we see a question from Laura Burton. If I set cycle markers and then change the project tempo, the start and end of the cycle range stays at the same position. Length doesn't lock to the new bar position. Can it be locked to bars? All right, so let's take a look. All right, so let's say I'll have my cycle. All right. All right, and I'm just going to add a quick marker track here. Okay. All All right, so the cycle markers, and then change the project tempo. The start and end of the cycle range stays at the same position. Length doesn't lock to the new bar position. Can it be locked to bars? Okay. Okay, so when we have our cycle markers set here, so I'm not sure if you mean the left and right locators, but you said cycle markers. So now if I change my tempo, it's going to be set to the same area here. But when we go to, you may have to right click on track control settings, and then you may see in hidden controls, toggle time base. So you want to take toggle time base and add it to there. So if I wanted this to be, so let's say we have 8 measures here, and I look at this and we go to, I'll add a ruler track just so we could see this a little easier. And we have this set to seconds, okay? So now if this is in musical mode, I change the tempo, the markers. We can see that the time is changing here on the bars and beats, but it's staying to 8 bars. But if I put this into linear mode, basically uncheck so we don't see the quarter note there, and now as I adjust, we could see that it's going to maintain its same position with time, even though the tempo is changing. So the markers could be set to work in linear mode, which sounds like what you want, Laura, or it could be set to work in musical mode. So musical mode, it will stick to, the markers will stick to the same position tied to the bars and beats. With linear mode, it's going to be tied to the actual time and not to bars and beats. So the relationship between the markers and time will stay constant in linear mode. The relationship between bar and beat and markers, when it's in musical mode, that will stay constant and the time will change. So once again, right click, go to track control settings, and if it's under hidden controls, just simply click on it and add, and then it'll become visible right here to see. Okay, so I have a friend who wants Nuendo and has Cubase. He asked if I could find out if it was an accident that there is not a cross grade to Nuendo from current Nuendo sale. So, there was a big promotion, I think in May or June. With that, so they will do it periodically, in specific promotions. I don't think that promotion is currently going on. So, but there is a promotion on, right now just on Nuendo itself. So different times there will be different promotions. Okay, so I just see, okay, maybe I misunderstood a question on the editor. So I'll try to is it possible to open the key drum editor event in a full-size window with the notes in the center? All right, so let's just... Okay, so let's say if I come here, let's go to full screen. I'll just toggle. So one thing, so just make sure I'm reading this right, with all notes in the center. So now when I'm here, let's say if I open that, so but let's say if I just copied this a bunch of times, Okay, so, and let me just try this. So if we put in stationary cursor, so it may not go like where you're in the center of the notes, but based on the, so I'm not sure if you wanted like the song position, like when you double click on an event that it takes it directly to the middle. So this could also be tied with this transport setting for used video files edit mode. So when I double click here, wherever the song position is will be maintained when we go to our key editor. And there's also, so if you wanted to see that, if you have that particular preference set, so let's say, I'll just take this to a larger view here. So let's say with this transport setting, so some people may always want it to be as, just, so as I click on an event, that would automatically take the cursor to the beginning of that event. So, but if with this unchecked, if you wanted to double click that, your song position will be maintained. And then I think if you just hit, and there's probably, I think you could just go to zoom full or zoom to event. It's Shift E. That will, you know, allow you to see the entire event within kind of the editor window. So, but it may not move the cursor. So the song position cursor will either maintain its same area. So I know some people will hit, like, you know, you make a macro to open the editor and just to hit Shift E to see the events like that. So let me know if that helps. And I'm just saying, by default, the event is shifted to the left. It is less than one full screen size. So, you know, try hitting Shift E and see if you have the use video files edit mode, because that will take the cursor to the beginning of the selected event like we see here. So I just see a question. I want to buy this USB licenser. Do you suggest to wait and see how things are going to change? So I think it's a great viable system. And if you want it to be running kind of the bigger Cubases, I would do it now, and that will always give you access to previous generations as well. And I think you'll have the benefit of having, if there's a change, that, you know, you have an existing system that is, you know, very well established and working great. So. You see from Cedric, just wishing a big hello to Cuba's Mafia, and corrected to Cubase Mafia. All right. Okay. So you see, hey everyone, is there a way in Cubase to swap samples? Let me just find it here. Okay, is there a way in Cubase to swap samples into playlists on the fly in one click? For example, I have a kick pattern that I like, but I want to try another kick sample without touching the pattern. So some people will do it like in a sampler track, but depending on how it's laid out. But let's say if I jump back to here, and I wanted to replace like this kick sample. So if it's kind of broken out, where this is like an independent audio file here, I could just go directly to my media. And let's go to loops and samples. And now what I could do is just hold down the Shift key and drag another kick sample. And it'll ask me if I want to replace all the events. And And you could just kind of try out different ideas like this, just drag it over top. So you could do that. And if it was more like, you know, where it's one audio file with a lot of kicks, what you could do, and we'll show you this quickly. So let's say, okay, I want to take like all of these kicks and replace them. At this point, we could just double click. Let's go into the sample editor to the hit points, and we're gonna find our threshold, and I'll say, let's just create MIDI notes. I could add a sampler track. So let me just add a sampler track. So once I'm here, I'm gonna say, let's create MIDI notes. Let's put it on to, I'll just say C3, because that's our kind of default sample. And I'll say, let's put on the first selected track. So now when I go to this sampler track, so I'm going to just come directly over to the sampler track here. And what I want to do is, so we'll go to our sampler control, and I could just find any kick sample. Let's see if there's kicks in here. All right, so now I could drag this in and then just have that particular sample track, and that will. So at this point, I could just have the sampler track just kind of play in. So if it's where the samples are, so if you just do kind of a create MIDI notes and have that go to a sampler track, and then you could just go to the particular sample track, and at this point just drag and drop samples in. So like while it's playing, I'll just come right over here. So now I could just have this play this particular and just replace the sample. So if it was a recording that was just done over a long period of time, you could just simply turn it into MIDI notes, copy, and have that automatically go to a sampler track and just drag and drop samples in and replace it. If it's like a sample that's been copied multiple times, just hold down Shift and drag the sample over top. Okay, reading through. Okay, so we just see how to set up control room so that you can switch between your mix and a reference song. Okay, so let's take a look. And just for people's reference, I'm not too far behind. I'm about 17 minutes behind. So just FYI with that from the question. So I'm trying to catch up. But let's say, let me find a particular file. this one will work. Okay, so if we want to use a reference mix, now the problem is a lot of people use a reference mix, and if they have plugins on their master bus, when they start doing processing, they take a master track and then run it through, like, you know, plug-in processing on the master bus and compare that. It's difficult. So here I'm going to have just an audio file that's going to be set up as let's say this is our reference track, and I have, all right, so I'll just do kind of, and this is actually just a mix down, so I'm going to do an obnoxious EQ on this particular file. Maybe not that. Hang on just 1 second. Okay, so let's say on this file here, let's say this is our reference. Now, what I want to do is to not send this to my stereo output. So when we play this track back, it's playing, but it's not actually running through this particular, it's not running through my master processing, through the master bus. So I'm going to go to the audio connections, and let's go to the control room. And I have one just set up here. I'll remove this. So I'm going to add a Q mix. Okay, so let's say we're going to add a Q, and I'm going to make this a stereo Q, and we'll call this reference. Okay, so when we come here, this will be, let me just get my, all right, so so we have this set as our reference, and I think that as we come over here, and I'm just going to set up my Q mix one more time because I didn't pay attention to my position of it. Bear with me. Okay, so I'll just, all right, so this will be Q2, okay. Okay, so now we have a stereo reference. So it's going through the control room. Now the control room doesn't monitor through this particular master chain. So now what I want to do is to take the track that has my reference, go to my Q sends. I want to turn it on, and we'll set it to 0 dB. So I'm going to just EQ my reference here. So we have that. So it's kind of obnoxiously different. So let's say this is my Q mix. My Q mix isn't going through here, but my Q mix is now going through the control room. But let's say if I wanted to put something obnoxious, like a flanger. So now on my main mix, everything's going through the flanger. So just on our, we see this on our master processing. So if I wanted to listen to my reference track, I could just click right there. That's my reference track. And we could, if we set it 0 dB, we won't have to adjust the volumes. And this is my mix, reference to your mix. So that's how you could use just a Q mix just as a reference bus, so that you could easily switch back and forth, and you could set up key commands to just go back and forth between those two different cues very quickly, so that you could listen to your mix versus the reference, and the reference is not getting processed through the master effects bus. All right, so we see, hi Greg, when I duplicate my piano track for a guitar sound and have the guitar play in its regular string manner, I hope I asked the question correctly. So, generally, when you do that, the guitars will probably just kind of play back the same information. So let's say if I wanted to take, this Rhodes part here. All right, so if I wanted to duplicate, let's say I wanted to add another track here. So let's say I want to add an instrument track and I wanted this to be guitar. So I'll just do like a Hallian Sonic SE. And let's say if I wanted to be, so let's just find an acoustic guitar. So let's say maybe like a nylon string. All right, let's. Let me just see if I can find maybe an electric guitar. All right, so let's say now if I copy these parts here. All right, let me just maybe switch the sound here. So those are kind of playing the same notes, and that's fine. But if you want it to be like the exact guitar voicing, you would probably need a particular instrument that handles that, and that could be something like T guitar. So you notice that when I come over here, so, and this is kind of a special thing with different sample libraries. So let's say if I want to go to my T guitar, so now as I would play this, so if I play a chord here, whatever chord I have, and then I could voice the chord here. So let's say it's an E chord, an E minor chord. I could now just kind of, and that will actually play it in the same voicing as a guitar would do. So if I play an E chord here, and let's say, so that would strum it like a guitar voicing, but if I play a D chord, it doesn't play it lower than the E, because the lowest note that we could have here so we could hear each string. But if I play D chord, so it's really kind of up to how the instrument interprets that, versus, so if I wanted to just kind of play, let's say instead of that particular sound, I can now just kind of come over here, let's say with a Rhodes. And let me just put a metronome on. So whatever kind of chords that we're doing, we could just play. So that's seeing the chord information come, and then you could strum and have those strums automatically map to the guitar voicings. But that's generally not like a typical copy to and just have a guitar sound play, but a specific guitar library like T guitar or M guitar that will allow you to do that. So good to see you on the live stream, Oren. Glad you could make it and join us. Okay, so we have a question. What is the lane function and how do we utilize it? Lane 1, lane 2, etc. Okay, so let's take a look. All right, let me open up a project. All right, so a lot of times people use lanes to kind of do what's called comping or composite take. So let's say if I wanted to do several different passes, and we'll often see this with guitar parts or vocals is very common. So let's say, okay, we have... So I could do like one pass, and then let's say, okay, we wanted to listen to a different pass. We could use like, now this would be like version 2. Version 3, take 3. So we could have these different versions. And ideally what you could do is once you have the hand tool and the lanes are visible, I could just say, okay, I just want to take that part from there. I want that part from this take. And you could just hold down Command or Control and say, oh, I like this one. And then you could just come over here and pick and choose the exact parts that you want. So if this was the ideal comp, I could now just come here and it's going to play this part from this take, go seamlessly right in. So that's what lanes will allow you to do, is to easily assemble and create these, like a performance from multiple recordings, so that you can just seamlessly come right over here and say, oh, I've just played this great idea, you know. And we would see this kind of paradigm on, you know, analog tape where people would do it on different tracks. And you could still do that, but it's not quite as fluid. But this way you have kind of one voice playing at a time, and you could just find the best parts of multiple performances and create a new composite performance very easily. Okay, so we see, so from Laura, thanks, Greg, with the cycle moving issue. It's the purple cycle range at the top that isn't sticking to bars when I change tempo. Okay, so let's say if I'm here and I change the tempo, so it could be like, what is the master time? So let's say our master time is set to seconds. So I'll just say our master time here is set to seconds, but we're at bars and beats. And now as I adjust the tempo, we could come right here. So make sure that the master time here is set, that these are in sync. So if this is set to bars and beats and this is set to bars and beats, and I adjust that, these will stay the same, because it's going to be our master time here is set to bars and beats. But if I switch this to seconds, but I manually switch this to bars and beats, now as I adjust, we could see that as I adjust the tempo, that those will move. So just make sure that, you know, these two you probably want set to the same value, or you could set them independently. So this would be the master time format, and this would be kind of the master, like what format this is actually set to there. So just make sure again that if you have this, so if you want to stay to the tempo, you could just come right there. So try that, Laura. Okay. Okay, going through some more questions here. Okay, so we see a question from John Costigan. Hi, Greg. I'm using TR-505 for 14-bit samples, which seem to fit the 20-year-old song I'm redoing. I tried Groove Agent SE kits, but the pitches aren't as satisfying. How can I update this song? Okay. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, but the SE kits, but the pitches aren't as satisfying. How can I update the song? So if you want it to sound more vintage, let's come to this project. So I'll show you a trick that you could do to make it sound more vintage. So if you're going for a particular kind of sub 16-bit sample kind of vibe, all right, so I'm just going to do this with a beat agent kit. All right, let me just load up some patterns here. Let me just do this approach. So let me just. All right, so if you come over here, but there is a standard mode, but you could also go to turn vintage, and this will give you kind of like a 12-bit sound to it, or a turntable. So there are some different like playback. I'm sorry, it's like the world's worst pattern of all time, but you could try some of these particular sounds, and one of the things that you could also do very easily, if you have the full Groove Agent, you could actually just sample directly in. But if you just record, if you say, okay, this TR-505 is just, I'm really feeling it, just record a sample directly in, as audio into Cubase, and just drag the audio file into Groove Agent. And that way, if you're 505, the power supply dies, the display doesn't turn on, you can still have all the samples directly inside. But, if you load it into a Beat Agent kit, check out some of the different, this is like a 12-bit, I think it's kind of maybe like an EMU SP 1200. And then you also have Turntable Mode. And what Turntable Mode is, like back when samplers only had like 1 megabyte of memory, you could, people would sample at 33, sample from like a 33 LP record at 45 RPM and then slow it down so that you could have slightly more space in the samples. So that kind of degradation is what the Turntable Mode will allow you to do as well. So a couple things to try there, John. Okay, it's great to see JVI on the live stream. All right. Okay, so we just see how to open the MIDI editor window to a full window. So let's say if we're here, by default, it may just automatically double click to the lower zone. But again, go to Preferences, to Editors, and say Open Editor. Command opens, you can say double click, opens editor in a window, hit Apply, and come right over here. And now when you double click, it'll just go directly into its own editor. So again, go to Preferences, to Editors, and you can say double click opens editor in a window or window in a lower zone. Okay, so I just see using no window 11 every time I open my edit history, it always starts from the top. Action number 1, not on my latest action. It's a minor convenience, but it's just kind of tiring to scroll down every time. All right, so let's see if we see the same thing here in Cubase. So let's let's do a bunch of edits. All right, so let's just come over here to my edit history. So so you can see as we do this, it's always going to be kind of the last action state will be kind of at the bottom, and we'll go through, but that's kind of selected. So let's say if I close my edit history, okay. So there we go to the top. All right, so you don't want to necessarily scroll. So one quick way of doing it is just to do an edit that you want it to, that you could undo right after the fact. And let me just see. I don't think there's a preference for that or a way to kind of switch it. But if you wanted to automatically navigate to the bottom, so let's say we open up the edit history here. I know this is a workaround, but if we go to the edit history, just move one event and then you could undo it, and that will automatically take you to the bottom. And so that's one way of just doing it. So you could move an event and undo it. Or let's say if I come here to the edit history, I'll open it. So let's see if I just do an undo, if that takes me, or if you just hit Control or Command Z, that will automatically take you to the bottom as well without having to do an edit. So those are a couple ways to do that, but I'll kind of mention that and pass along as maybe a way to kind of toggle back and forth to flip those. All right, so you see from Peter Lawson, great to see you on the live stream. How do you create an ethereal vocal professionally? A step-by-step process will help. Thank you. Miss you guys. So, there's a number of ways to do this, and it could really, ethereal means different things to different people. But, if I had to kind of choose something, I may start with the multi-tap delay. So let's say if I want it to... So let's just jump to, let's say if I wanted to do this, we'll go to this project. But if you want to do like really creative stuff, probably a multi-tap delay would be a good place. I mean, you can always do long reverbs, and that could be ethereal to some people, but let's just do a little bit of multi-tap delay. And I think we could even just kind of go through some of the different presets. So let's say, well, just to get some context. At the ground, not a sound. Tell me why something's wrong. We can't go on. And let me go ahead and just... someone tonight. All right, let me just adjust my mix up. So. How can I see? All right. You run and hide from the light. All right, let me just try it as an insert. For some reason it's not really hearing it. I just walk a straight line out of the shadows here, where you can be by my side, be someone tonight. So you get some like really interesting sounds with that. So it's just... change my mind. I can't forget when we first met. What I saw in your eyes. So afraid to smile. You think that I... And because here what you could do is you could have different taps, and each of the taps you could... I can't forget when we first met. So you could say, okay, I just wanted to add a delay on a delay. And if I wanted to add even a reverb. Afraid to smile. You think that I change my mind. I can't forget when we first met. What I saw in your eyes.
so afraid to smile. You think that I change my mind. I can't forget when we first met.
So our interesting sound design.
Afraid to smile. You think that I change my.
So if that's kind of what you're going for, you could definitely kind of check out like the multi-tap delays, a good source for ethereal stuff, because each tap could have its own set of plugins on it as well. So it's a big rabbit hole that you go down. All right. Okay, so we see after prompting for ASIO driver, it starts with the message audio in output not connected. After changing the driver to no driver, only then the MIDI keyboard can be heard. Help have Cubase AI 11. So just from More the Conqueror. So if you could let us know, so like which ASIO driver that you're using. So I'm not sure if you're using with your Cubase AI, if you're using the MIDI keyboard to trigger virtual instruments, or if it's just using the MIDI keyboard. If it has its own built-in sounds, that information would be helpful. If, we should have enough time to, if you want to ask again. But if you could specify, maybe give a little more information on if it's if you're triggering internal sounds from a virtual instrument or sounds from the MIDI keyboard itself. All right. So question, Wavelab Cast has these really fast and snappy tools. For example, Voice Exciter and Maximizer. Where can I find these two in Cubase or equivalents? So if you wanted to just... I think the Voice Exciter is, basically just a quick EQ. That's a preset. So, even using kind of the built-in EQ. And if you wanted a maximizer, just go to the channel strip here. And then you could just have the maximizer enabled right there. But yeah, they're just kind of derived from other functions that are already inside of Cubase. Okay, so Peter Lawson just say, Greg, can you please give a list of VSTI used for writing music for advertising? Is it also possible to take us through composing for advertising next week? This is my humble request. So we could do some stuff with advertising. I would say if you had to have, like Hallian Sonic is a great source for that. Groove Agent, like I had a friend that, does a lot of national ad campaigns, and he's always the first one anytime there's a new instrument set or loop set, and I remember I think it was when Cubase 10.5 came out, and the next day he's like, yeah, I did, he called me up, he's like, oh, I just love the new Cubase stuff, and he just went to I think he went to Laser Beams, and see if I remember which one, but he just used one of these, I think Haywire. And he got like a whole Revlon commercial, and he's just like, yeah, I just come here and, start off and just let's see if I have this lit up right. I'll just do it in a new project, but, so he just used this and just kind of used the stock built-in sounds. All right. So, but yeah, we could do that. So a lot of people use, like, for advertising, it could vary a lot. We still see people using, I still hear like old virtual guitarist stuff a lot. My son was watching Mythbusters this summer, and that was kind of old. A lot of, I'm not sure why I'm not hearing this now. Let me just check my connections here real quick. Yeah, it seems like we should be hearing it. Let me just try another project quickly. And revert this, but yeah. So and a lot of people, we said we could spend a little bit of time on Tuesday's live stream with kind of some jingle stuff. Let me make sure. So. Okay, so we just see how can you actually rearrange channels in the mixer. So currently the only way to rearrange the channels, and we know it's a long-standing feature request, is to just kind of drag it in the project window. So currently we don't have the ability of rearranging in the mix console, but you could just kind of come right here and drag it in the project window on the main project window, and that automatically carries directly over to the into the mix console. So great to see Jean-Marie on the live stream. Okay, sorry, my chat field jumped on me. Okay, so to see a question. Hello, Greg. What does this message mean, please? More preload memory requested than the max 1,207 megabytes. Increase the preload limit or reduce the preload time to load the samples. Thanks. All right, so if you're dealing with, let's say, depending on the samples that you're loading, if you have a huge orchestral library, so we could see this in either Groove Agent or Hallian. So let's say basically it's going to load some of the samples for virtual instruments. It's going to load some of the samples in memory, and then the rest of it will be streamed from the hard disk. So the preload is going to be how many samples you could load into memory. So if you're doing it in Groove Agent, you could just come to the instrument itself, and once you go under the options, you'll see the preload amount. So you could just simply raise this higher. So, and this used to be, this value was kind of set initially when, a lot of people were running 8 gigabytes of RAM. So, if you have more memory, you can just simply allocate more memory here in the instrument. If it's in Hallian Sonic, so let's say if it's in Hallian Sonic SE and Hallian Sonic, it's going to be under options again. So you could just raise that there. And if it's in the full Hallian, it's very similar spot. So just increase that, because it's going to try to, you're basically almost choking the amount of the instruments that could be preloaded. And if you have enough memory, let me just do the correct instrument this time. Sorry. And if you have enough memory, that you could just, allocate more so that more of the samples could be loaded into the computer's memory, so that as you work on it, you don't have to put as much strain on your CPU. So you just simply come here and you can see the max preload amount just kind of set. So increase that, and then the message should go away. And sometimes you see it with, you may have seen it earlier, if you're loading multiple kits in Groove Agent, like the full Groove Agent, then you may, you may get that message, but you could just increase it for each instance. Okay, so Jean-Marie, so I think I may have some time over the weekend if you want to work on the immersive with these with the effects for the shimmer reverb. So if you're around tomorrow or Sunday, I should have some time. All right, so we see any idea where I can find info on creating synths with Hallion? I tried to developer Steinberg, but the links seem to be missing from the site. Is there a manual that I can get my hands on? So if you want to know, Captain Energy, okay, so if you, let's say if we have Hallion, so I'm not sure if you want it to be like a Hallion partner. If you want that, you could, if you want information on that, to be like a Hallion partner company, you know, if you want to design your own sounds. But, you know, as we start a program, you know, I could just kind of come over here and then, you know, if you want to start building, you know, I could just say, okay, let's come right over here. Let's add. So we can say new zone. So we can say synth zone. And then at this point, I'll just show you on an actual synth here real quick. So at this point, you can say, I want it to be a synth zone. And then when you go to edit zone 1, at this point, you could come over here and say, okay, I could have, you know, different oscillators. I could add my filters. And if I say now to this layer, I wanted to come over here. Let's add a granular zone. So at this point, I could have multiple forms of synthesis all available here. And I wanted to add an organ oscillator or wavetable zone. I could just come right over here. So let's say, okay, so now when I'm in this zone, this could be an organ oscillator. So as we wanted to start playing sounds, we could do this and then start blending all the sounds. So one great resource, if it's about, you know, learning how to do sounds and create your own synths, you know, check out A Man and His Song. I think that's a wonderful whole kind of, you know, video tutorial series on how, you know, it'll take you several hours, but it's well worth checking out. Yeah. All right, so we see a question from Sven. Comp Tool, can you please show how to crossfade between the selected bits to avoid clicks and pops? So as you can see, like when I was doing that before, you didn't hear any clicks or pops. So let's come over here. Let's activate this. So I'll just kind of turn this up so you can hear. But there's always, when you come directly here, you could just say auto fades settings. So you could just say, okay, I just want to do auto fade ins and auto cross fades. And what that's going to do is anytime that the events, you know, are while they're playing back, that, you know, as you're playing the events back, that it will do a short fade in and fade out. But you could also just, if you needed to do it manually, you could just adjust fades here. But let's say if I select, you know, both these events and hit X, that will do just a small crossfade as well. But most of the time when you do this, it's doing it at the 0 crossing by default. So if you have snap at zero crossing as you do a comp. It'll automatically do that to minimize fades and stuff, you know, any clicks and pops. But always check out the auto fades settings as well, Sven. All right. Hey, Greg, what is the best way to collab with someone online cross DAW? Is this even possible? Not really. What most people end up doing, you know, with Cubase, you could have, you know, if you wanted to record someone, you could go to VST Connect VST Connect, and someone could download a free program, and at that point you could you know, have someone download a free program for Mac or PC, or they could even, I think it's $5 on the on the Apple App Store. So at this point, you could just, you know, record them directly into your system. What a lot of people do, and what I get a lot, you know, is, you know, someone may just email like a stereo mixdown, and you could just simply work back and forth. There are some generic ways of, you know, where people will take an audio file that has a timestamp and you could transfer it that way, but it's not going to carry like plugins or EQ settings across different DAWs. But if you want to record someone, check out the VST Connect, and you could record 2 channels at once. So. All right, so we see that Mark Rabin's back, and he's saying he loves that Jan exists and will index his stream. So, yeah, kudos to Jan. Okay, so we just see, is there a way to save Mixdown folder default, maybe a config or .ini, to write out the constant path? So when you do the Mixdown, so say we do an export audio Mixdown, it will automatically maintain the path here. So the last path, so if you don't change the path, this will automatically be stored. So let's say if I want to choose, let's say in this folder, so I'll just say, so now I go to a different project, activate it, and now when I go to export audio mixdown, I may also have this preference set to so I thought that would stick, but now, you know, one of the preferences that people had requested for a long time was to have a project mixdown folder. So as soon as you do an export audio mixdown, it would automatically send it within the project folder to a folder called Mixdown, and all the mixdowns would go there. So it's kind of more of a unified solution, but I don't know of a way to automatically have that go to one constant area. I think before it would maintain the same path, and then, but people complained about that quite a bit because they're just mixed down into a folder that was not chosen. So, but you could manually choose it. Okay, just going through more comments. Thanks for all the great questions. If you learned something new, make sure that you actually hit the like button. All right, so I just see from Kai Wen Franklin, Greg, what's up with the pad motion layers? Have you used it, and if so, how do you like it? So I just saw it announced yesterday. So it's created by my friend Danny Lux. I've known Danny 20 years. He's an incredibly prolific TV composer. So he does Manifest, and I think he's done Grey's Anatomy like for 18 or 19 years. So I know that whatever Danny does is really good, and he's actually, started creating his own sounds for his own use. So it's very much a real world thing and not necessarily about, oh, we have to have X number of this preset. So, Danny's like, I need this sound for projects, and he just made an instrument in Hallian to do it. So I haven't had a chance to do it, to play with it. I don't have a license of it. But I'll see if I could get one over the weekend, because I'm looking to always love kind of pad motion stuff because I don't play keyboards well. So. Okay, so we just see, how do I embed Isrc codes to my tracks when I'm exporting? Anyone can answer, please, if you know. So generally, we can't do it inside of Cubase, but you could do it inside of Wavelab. So let's come over here. So as soon as we go to Wavelab Pro, you could just come over here. So let's just say project. So when we want to come over here, so you could, put it in with metadata, you could do Isrc codes, or if you wanted to just do like for CDs, you could just come over here and in the CD tab be able to import, and I haven't learned Wavelab 11 yet, but probably if we just come over here to the CD tab, that you could just put the Isrc codes, but Cubase doesn't do it, but Wavelab does. So okay, reading through comments. All right, we see Michael Teens is here, so we should now all get virtual ice cream. So it's always better when Michael's on. Okay. So I just see from Jeff Sabelsky, are you familiar with the electric bass method, the complete electric bass player by Chuck Rainey? I've gone through quite a bit myself since I can't play oboe wearing a mask. So I haven't checked out that book, but I'm obviously a huge fan of Chuck Rainey stuff. So I met him once briefly. So, but I don't have that particular book. All right, we have David M checking in from Liverpool. Thanks for joining us. All right, so let's see. I think I'm caught up with the live questions. Let me jump to the questions that were mailed in. All right. So we just see a question. Can you explain, please, why in parallel compression or parallel processing you create 2 sends on a channel? I always do it with just 1 send, or am I doing something wrong? Thanks. So generally, when we're doing parallel processing, we want to send something to 2 different sources. So I'll just revert this. And let's say if I wanted to do it on this particular, let's say drums. So like drums are common, vocals are common, bass is common. So what I want to do is to take 2 different sources. So I'm going to add 2 group tracks. So I'm going to add 2 stereo groups. Okay, and what I want to do now is I'm going to select all of my drum tracks here and go to the sends, and I want to I'll just turn on quick link, and I'm going to send all of them to group 1 and activate it, and send them all to group 2 and activate it, and we'll bring that up. All right, I'm going to set absolute values here, so we'll say, okay, we're going to knock all these to say close to 0 dB. I'll just make it close enough. All right. So now when we play this, with the parallel processing so we send this to 2 different sources. All right. And I won't record this time. Sorry about that. All right. So what I want to do is we're going to have 1 source, but I want to take the other source and just kind of squash it with compression. All right, so now I have this source. And let's say I want to take this one, but this one's like really heavily compressed again. So let's say. So the goal is to kind of find the sweet spot between these 2 between these 2 channels. One that's compressed to kind of give it that kind of the meat to the sound, and one that will kind of have the original dynamics. So as I bring in my drums here, I'm going to bring in the heavily kind of compressed channel, and we're going to blend the 2. So we kind of get that kind of homogeny of the compressed channel, but we still have the original dynamics. So again, let's just come right here. And just kind of now blending those 2 sources together. So by itself, we get kind of the dynamics in this version, and we kind of get the punch when we blend in this. So that's often why we want it to be set to 2 separate, distinct destinations, so that as we're working with this, so if it's just kind of by itself, that sounds fine. But when we blend into parallel, we get kind of a better sound. So that's why we used kind of 2 different destinations with that instead of just using 1. Now, sometimes people will kind of get a parallel processing depending on their effect. So let's say if I wanted to come here and we look at the compressor, that we could often have a dry mix. So at this point, we could choose to kind of blend the source on Now, not all plugins have this wet dry ratio. So if you have a wet dry, depending on the plugin, you could do it with one send, but it could really kind of depend on the plugins. But generally, it's often not only just compression, but applying EQ as well. Okay, so we had a question. I'm working on an orchestral template and would like to set up each track so that all the MIDI parts on said track default to a particular clef and staff type. In the score editor, the manual advises to set this before recording anything, but I don't see how to access the score settings without creating a MIDI part. If I change the clef and staff type for that part, it doesn't always hold. Am I missing something? Would you kindly walk us through how to accomplish this? All right, so let's say if I was coming over and let's say I just want to do a quick brass thing. So I want to... All right, so let's say I want to do Woodwinds. I wanted a clarinet. All right, and let's just do flute. All right, and let's say a trumpet and trombone. So we'll come to brass. All right, so we'll have like different... All right, so I will come over here. Let's add a couple MIDI tracks. Okay, so now we'll have, as soon as I come here, and this should be our flute. And trumpet. And trombone, okay. Okay, so I think when you're kind of starting with a template, I think if we just come here and say, okay, I just want to add like just blank parts. Okay, so let's say this will be clarinet, flute, trumpet, and trombone. Okay, so what I want to do is, let's say I'll go into the score editor for each of these and say, okay, I want this to be in my display transpose. I want it to be for clarinet. Okay, so let's say, and I want that to be treble clef. And now I want this part here to be set for treble clef. And let's say for my trumpet, I want this to be set in for like an orchestral transposition. Hang on just 1 second, real quick. Okay, sorry about the interruption. All right, so we have trumpet. So let's look at this, and I want this to be set for, again, so trumpet, and then when I go to trombone, I want this to be non-transposing, but in bass clef. Okay, so now even though I kind of set those on the parts, I could delete that. So now, let's say I've deleted those particular parts. I'm going to come right over here. So we have our trumpet, flute, and let's say if I save that as my, so I'll select all of these. Let's go to our score menu and say open score editor. That we can see that the clefs have automatically been preserved. And, so once we come over here, we could also, just set your display transposition, but the clefs, so even though you need to kind of set it once with notes, but once you go there, you could actually just call up, even though you kind of maybe create a blank part to initially set the staff, and, what clef and orchestral transpositions. Then once you delete that, it will be stored within the particular part. So that should help you with that. Okay, so we just see a question. Is there any way to keep the pace of Midi when reducing the project's BPM? My problem is I have to double the pace of Midi while reducing the project's BPM from 200 to 100. That is, keep Midi pace after having the project's BPM. The problem is that my project contains both Wave and Midi, and by mistake, the project runs 200 BPM and sounds good. So that is good, but click is crazy with other problems as well. Thanks, Jan. Okay, so let's say if I just want to come here, and I'll just do a quick step entry, and let's say for quarter notes, I will. Okay, so let's say right now I play this back and listen to it. All right, so we're at 120 beats a minute. So we need to take this to 60 beats a minute, but have it sound the same. Okay, so I think there's a logical editor preset for this. So let's say when we go to Midi to logical editor, I want to say that there is, let's see if it's Dumble. Maybe half tempo. All right, so now I'm gonna just run a half tempo, and let's see if I do this right. Okay, I might have to do the opposite. Give me just a second. So let's try double tempo under standard set. Then apply. And now I'll set it to 60 beats a minute. So just go to under standard set. So select the event. Go to Midi to logical editor. You want to set under standard set preset to double tempo. And as you do that, then you can half the then you could half the tempo and it would still sound the same. Okay. So we had a question. Okay, so we just see a question. It's more of a musical question. Can you please explain down versus upbeat? Many people say upbeat for a song that is happy and downbeat for a song that is sad, though this is not true, is it? So sometimes when people are saying downbeat and upbeat for emotion, generally that could be an upbeat song, like upbeat and happy, like a smile goes up. To quote my son's kindergarten teacher. So some people will say that, but if you're kind of to think of what an upbeat or a downbeat is, we could often think of a downbeat is going to be like 1 and 3. So if you go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, and often, kind of in classical circles, it would often be called a downbeat because the conductor, their motion for determining where the 1 is, they start from the top and they drop. So they're like they kind of drop their hand down. So that's often called the downbeat. Often in drums, if we wanted to work with drums and we have like downbeats in drums, so downbeat is often going to be like the 1 of a measure. So like if we listen to the metronome, so let's say if we're here, and we listen to the metronome, we'll hear that different sound. I'll just jump back here to 120. So let's say that higher pitch, that's the downbeat. Now, if we wanted to just take a listen to, so let's say if I'm here, we could also, if I wanted to listen to the downbeat more specifically, I could just say, this would be the downbeat and the upbeat, downbeat, upbeat. So if we're doing on drums, the downbeat is often the kick, and the upbeat is going to be often the snare on 2 and 4. So it could be just something like if we're to listen to that in a metronome pattern, we could just come here. So down, up, down, up, down, up. So if we were doing a quick, annoyingly generic drum pattern, we could come right over here. Just go to this project. So when you hear like upbeat, that's often could be referred to as like the 2 and 4, the pulses of the beat, and downbeats often 1 and 3. So let's say, I just want to come here. Let's solo that, and I will just come. And so if I were to program quick drums, so as people want to kind of get a sense of where the music is coming, the downbeat is kind of what clues them in. So, and where they clap their hands will be on. So downbeat, upbeat, downbeat, upbeat. So if you wanted to just kind of come. Some people will just kind of use it interchangeably for downbeat is sad, upbeat could be happy. But often when you hear people referring to kind of a rhythmic position, that could be more of, the downbeat being like the 1 and 3, where people kind of get the rhythmic pulse, and where people clap, think of that as the upbeat. So you can do stuff like that. So, all right, let's move on to the next question. Hello, Greg. I have a fair amount of multi-velocity drum samples, kicks, snares, etc. Is it possible to import the 20, 30 layers of a snare sample to one track and process all the samples at the same time to my liking? Example, EQ, compression, verb, adjust level. So yeah, we could do this. And this is a great use case of the direct offline processing. So let's see if I have a project. I think I have some. Okay, so let's look here. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. All right, so let's say I have snares here that are kind of broken down by velocity level. I'll just place these all onto one particular. Okay, so let's say as I listen to this, I'm going to have kind of like my soft snare. And eventually they will slowly get louder. Okay, so if I wanted to process all these in kind of one go, I would just simply select them and go to audio. And let's say, okay, I just wanted to go to my direct offline processing. And I could just come right over here and say, okay, I want it to run these through a compressor. So I could just select my plugin. Let's say, let's go to my compressor. And so now what that's going to do is automatically apply that compressor to all of the channels. I want it to come over here and let's do a frequency EQ. So let's say as I'm directly here, I just wanted to take some of the low end out and maybe boost a little highs. So now that processing has gone on to all of them. I wanted to do, let's see what else was listed in the question. So let's say verb. So I just want to come here. Let's put just a little bit of reverence on. All right, so we can see that as we do auto apply that these will automatically be set. And let's say I just want to do a process and normalize. Okay, so now as we do this, so like maybe normalize isn't the best, but if you've made a mistake, you can now come over here and just delete the normalizing. So, and then if you wanted to, you could then just simply, save these as favorites and just simply call it up, or even just load in a track preset. So you can save that as a track preset and just say, okay, I just wanted to do this for, 6,000 files, and it will just render it. And then the original files can always be preserved to simply have access. So if you're dealing with drum sampling sessions, that's a great way of doing it. If you need to add tails, you could do that as well. So that way you could just simply come right there and process multiple clips simultaneously with a tremendous amount of flexibility. Okay, so I got this right before the live stream. So the Wavelab 11 update is simply great with lots of new useful features. However, one vital feature I've been waiting for years is still missing. In Cubase Pro, you can have an individual plugins inserted on each speaker output. This is still not possible in Wavelab Pro. All playback inserts are shared with all the speaker outputs where it's desperately needed. This is very important for anyone who uses room correction software such as RoomWorks. Accidentally mixing need not be the issue in Cubase Pro, or mastering a clear danger in Wavelab, though the wrong profile could easily end up in a disaster when the client wonders why the master sounds like crap. Is there a feature that needs to be carried over from Cubase Pro at this time? So one of the things that you could do in Wavelab that a lot of people don't know about is, and I'm not sure if you want to just have the plugins for monitoring. So let's say if I'm here, I'll just open this up. Let's just switch to, let's say, our waveform view. All right, so if we go to the preferences, and then go to plugins. So as we do this, so we could have plugins in different stages. So we could come over here, but let's say if I wanted to have this delay, a mono delay plugin, we have this option here for playback. So if I say I want the ability for the mono delay for playback, or Sonar works like a room correction, I could just activate playback, and then we have a playback processing tab here. So now as we come here, we could just choose to say, okay, my mono delay shows up there, and this will get processed, I believe, only on playback, but when we render files, it's not going to be rendered into the actual file itself. It's just only for playback. So, if you're looking to just have effects processing, like, a room correction plugin, as you mentioned, but not to have it rendered through here, just go to the preferences, go to plugins. You could expand, and, if you just come right over here, just say, okay, I wanted this EQ, and I want it, you could say, okay, show new plugin, show only plugins, so once you're right over there, and just enable that for playback. And then I think that'll do what you want. I think this was sent in from Sven, if I'm not mistaken, right before the live stream started. Okay. Okay, so we had a question. Thanks again for your great videos. The tip about using a logical editor to set up track names so you can color them that way is an amazing time saver. A couple follow-up questions to that. When I've saved coloring logical editor presets, how can I transfer them to another machine? Okay. So anytime that you make your own presets, the easiest way to kind of transfer them to a different machine is just to come over here. If you go to, the edit menu, you'll have a thing called Profile Manager, and at this point, you could export a profile. So your profile that will include all of your logical editor presets, your project logical editor presets, your key commands, your preferences, your global workspaces, all those things that kind of make your Cubase environment unique to you that you may have customized over time. And then all you have to do to the new environment is just simply go over there to the other computer and import those, and then that would automatically carry over. You could also manually copy it. That's the easiest way to do it. But if you go into, depending on your operating system, like on a Mac OS, which is what I'm on, you could come over here and go to Library. You may have to hold down the Alt Option key to have your library visible, and then go into Preferences here. So let's say, okay, we have our library, so Preferences, and then if we want to scroll down to Cubase 11, and then we will see presets, And then you could have like, Project Logical Editor presets. They'll just show up here as XML files. So you can manually copy them over if you wanted to. Okay. And then further question with this, how can I apply key command to a logical editor preset? So it'll be found under, so we go to key commands. We can now come right over here and it'll be under, you'll see process project logical editor preset. So anytime you've created a preset, you'll just see it come up right here in the process project logical editor preset. And then you could just simply assign a key command for that. So another question, can you design a macro to initiate several logical editor presets at the same time? So yeah, to do that, we would just, from the key commands dialog, so to start from scratch, we'll go to the edit menu to key commands. We'll make sure that you have show macros. At this point, we could say new macro. So we'll say PLE presets for Project Logical Editor. You can call it whatever you want. And then just come right over here, add command. Say, okay, add command. And then if you wanted to, all you have to do is go to the macro area. And here we could see the PLE presets, and then you could assign a keyboard shortcut to your macro that contains Project Logical Editor presets. So if you have a naming scheme that will involve, 20 different naming conventions, and you want to combine them all together, just, create a macro like that. All right, this is from Michael Pierce. I had a client ask me today if I could mix in Apple's new spatial format. I wondered if there were any plans to add more surround formats to Cubase, or would I need to dive into Nuendo and work with Dolby Atmos? So, when you're doing this, it's basically Dolby Atmos kind of rebranded to work with Apple ecosystems. So, currently, there's been some discussion. It's still kind of in the early stages. But, most people that are doing it are just doing Atmos mixes and exporting, the ADM files as a Dolby Atmos, and that's what they're using for that. So at this point, it's going to require Nuendo for that, but, who knows what the future holds with different formats. And all right, so let me go jump back to our live discussion. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Hope everyone has learned something. If you learned something new, make sure that you do hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, that you have subscribed to the channel. All right. All right, let's go back and I'll find my place in the discussion. We hope that everyone's having a good day and learning some new stuff. All right. All right, just finding my spot. All right, so we have Neurotic Nexus checking in from Ukraine. All right, thanks for joining us. All right. All right. All right, so see, I get 3 scoops of Moo Linium Crunch ice cream from Michael Teams. Thank you for that. It's very generous. It'll help my throat on this Friday. Okay, so I just see, Greg, I think I understand why Hallion 6 hasn't incorporated this, just from Jeff Sabelski. It hasn't incorporated to CC121 as a controller for Hallion, such as for play, stop, record, fast forward, etc. It seems like it's simply too deep of hardware outside of Cubase. I mean, once you start kind of getting into Hallion, a lot of people don't necessarily, you can use it to transport for doing sampling internally. So we'll just show that real quick. So let's say if we're just going into like the sample recording, so we could just come. So like a lot of these functions are pretty, so I don't have my CC121 hooked up right now, but a lot of these can be done pretty easily using like a generic remote control if you do it all the time, but it may not work so much with the CC121. But if you're doing a lot of sampling, you could just map, I'm pretty sure you could map the user assignable functions. You could probably map that to those particular functions, but it may not tie into the CC121. I don't think it's probably just more of an oversight that it wasn't implemented after the sampling features were implemented. All right, so you just see from Jean-Paul, this is only possible with the Pro version. So if you can give me some context for what that was, I know it may have been something else that I was showing, but I'd be happy to answer if you wanted to just incorporate that. Maybe we can catch it before the end of the live stream. We have about 50 minutes left. Okay, so we see, how can you make a vintage radio effect for voice? Let me just do like a voice file here. Let me just. All right, so there is a plugin. I think it's found under distortion. So called Grungelizer. It's an early VST plugin. So let me just revert this. It's kind of an oldie but a goodie. So let's say as an insert, let's see if it's under distortion, Grungelizer. Okay, so you can see that you can already add noise, crackle, and you can do this at 33, 45, or 78 RPM. Distortion, you could add different EQ, and the hum, you could actually just kind of come here and make it 50 or 60 hertz, depending which continent you live on. But let's say I just wanted to get rid of the crackle and some of the hum, and we'll just kind of start off and we'll play the vocal.
You stare at the ground, not a sound. Tell me why something's wrong. We can't go on living a lie.
So you kind of have, and I think there's even presets.
How can I feel you? How can I see you when you're running hide from the light? Be someone tonight.
So if you just wanted to kind of blend that in as well.
Tell me why something's wrong. We can't go on.
And you can listen to that in context. So still kind of a classic effect. So if you wanted to. So the grungizer is really good for that. And you could also, I think there's even an EQ preset if you wanted to go that route. So let's say we jump to the EQ and it's like telephone or AM radio, something like that. Just trying to remember what the preset was. Phone line. So now if you wanted to play back, you could listen to it through. So that basically is just kind of filtering out the other frequencies. So that's a great way of doing kind of a vintage radio effect for voice. All right, we see Daryl has made his first lead sheet in Dorco. All right, that's great. I see I musically quoted from the Mozart Clarinet Concerto, so that was good. All right, reading through more comments. All right. See, Michael Teams has been busy trying not to know about his retirement party tomorrow. So congratulations, Michael. Now you have more time to play with Cubase. All right. All right, so I just see an option which would be very practical and necessary on Cubase would be the fact of integrating the possibility of displaying ghost notes. So maybe if you could tell us exactly, there's different meanings for ghost notes. So sometimes people will view ghost notes as, okay, I'm here and I only want to see pitches with the events on, so I don't see anything else. Some people call that ghost notes. We could also, do scale assistant. So we could say only show notes in G major. If we wanted to only see notes with the particular pitches, if you want to see ghost notes as, we also see it sometimes in notation views. So let's say if I come here, that you could, just double click on a note here. And if you wanted to do kind of, grace notes or Q notes for note head shapes. So if you want to do grace notes there, some people call that ghost notes as well. So if you could maybe give a little more context what the ghost notes means to you. All right, so just see from Redna Music, you guys should spend also time for us hip hop producers making songs like Kanye and Drake, reversing own played melodies, making own samples with the quarter plugins, etc. So, if you have any questions on those particular techniques, we show whatever technique is asked. So if you have particular, ideas and questions that you don't know, just let us know. So it's really here, we're just kind of, the intention is really just to kind of answer user questions. And we have lots of people that are doing stuff in Cubase in that genre. So, so a lot of the Drake stuff is done in Cubase. So, for instance. See Michael Pierce saying, never let your real friends clap on 1 and 3. So that's always a good. All right, so we have a question from Ted Springman. So for microphone recording in control room with fans and computer noises, does Cubase have a noise reduction to eliminate such a noise floor? So a lot of people will end up, you could end up kind of doing, there's not a built-in plugin, but you could do some of it with, if you wanted to do spectral layers. And if you have like the full spectral layers, you could just come right over and just say, okay, I want to go to audio, to extensions. The full version will actually allow you to kind of take a particular noise floor and be able to, if you have an isolated bit of noise, which is easy to do if you're kind of doing it in your own control room, you could then make the selection of the noise and save that as a noise print. So when you go to your noise reduction, this is in the full version, you can register the noise and then take it out. But ideally, we know it's not always possible, but, if you could, not record the noise, it's always the best solution. But, realize that people working at home, they may not have a fully well-treated room that's, intended for a lot of the critical recording. So that's why SM7s are really popular for home recording, because they don't pick up a lot of stuff. All right, so you see 808 or 909 device for drama creativity. You need to find a plugin. So, if you're looking for kind of 808, 909 sounds, you could definitely, check out a lot of the kits inside of Groove Agent. So if you wanted to, I'll just jump over to a quick, just jump right over here to this project and activate it. And let's say, even if we now want to come over here, you could, and let's say, okay, I want to take this and do all sorts of, so if you wanted to just kind of take your kits and you could shape the sound quite a bit. So if you want to do coarse tuning, if you wanted to come over here and even do kind of different envelopes amount, you could. And then if you want to get really very, like 808, 909 kick happy, one of the instruments that's included in Absolute 5, but also sold separately. If you get into Backbone, it's probably the most powerful drum sampler ever done. So all sorts of different kicks samples that you could access directly from here as well. So, and do all sorts of drum synthesis. So I don't think you need a third, if you needed a third party plugin, if you're really into designing 808, 909 kicks, check out Backbone. It's a perfect tool for that. All right, so we also see Cubase misses swing templates. Why? Common. So really all you have to do is we have swing templates. You could actually just have a MIDI plugin right here. So if you wanted to, and this is often used by Teddy Riley and other people. So if you go to, you could go to the quantizer plugin. So, and then you have swing right there. If you have just, if you have a number of, let's say if I just come here, I'll just put in a couple of, once we're in the quantized category, you also have swing directly here as well. So you could just apply different swing and different quantize options. We did invent groove quantize. So. So we see granular plugins in Cubase would be amazing. So if you wanted to come right over here, you could already have granular instrument. So if you wanted to come right over here to Pad Shop, you could take any sample and drag and drop it directly in. So let's say I want to come over here to drag that in, and now you could just come over here and do all your granular synthesis based on any sample that you could just drag directly in. So there is granular capabilities already that come in Cubase. Okay, so we see from David M. Hi, Greg. Is there a codec that will allow me to load an M4A Zoom file into Cubase without having to first convert it in a cloud converter or Audacity? I'm on Windows 10 using Cubase 11 Pro. So, if it's an M4A, it's going to have to be converted to like an MP3 or WAV file. So if it's just an audio file, so it will probably have to be converted. So there's still tremendous amount of different codecs that are, or just, it's kind of an ever evolving list of different compression formats. Okay, read through more comments. All right, so I think I am approaching near the end. Let me see how it's going. All right, so let's see. All right. All right. Sorry. Just. All right. So finding my spot. Sorry. Okay, so we had a question. Hi, Greg. Thanks for the answer in the drum samples. I need to export the layers for use in a drum module. If they are processed on one track, will they export as one file or stay as separate sample layers? So if we have done everything kind of laid out, where we have our samples, let's say these are all of our different samples, and I did my processing, and those were all separate files, they're still separate audio files. So when we do the direct offline processing, when we do direct offline processing, that keeps the files in their original state. When it would turn into a particular file, we could also at that point, if we chose to, bounce selection, that could take them into one file, or export audio files that would take them into that would combine it to one audio file. But the direct offline processing, if they're separate audio files, you do the direct offline processing and they're still the same files, just with the processing independently. Okay, so I see just a comment from Daryl to Jeff Sabelski. Just says, I just bought Studio Logic Mixface and Monogram CC to use as controllers. Unfortunately, when I push a button on the Mixface to record it, it creates a note that gets recorded. So most MIDI controllers are actually, for the communication protocol, it may send a MIDI note message, and then Cubase could come and say, okay, we're going to take that MIDI note message and do this particular function. But it still transmits a MIDI note. And how to get around that, Daryl, is to come over here. And we will go to your studio setup and go to the MIDI port setup. And wherever you have the mix face, you could just uncheck in all MIDI. And then that won't actually send MIDI to the track when the MIDI track is set to all MIDI inputs. So once again, just come over here, Daryl. Go to studio setup. Let's go to the MIDI port setup, and just wherever you have those MIDI ports, uncheck in all MIDI, and then it won't transmit that MIDI note for you. Okay. And I see from Michael Pierce, yeah, so we'll do the other question on Tuesday, so we'll have that. Have some more time to get a file prepared. All right, so we see Daryl says 2 likes for today, but only 1 hit. Wise man. All right. All right, so we're just seeing a comment from David M. from Liverpool. Says, I've done this with an Edirol RO9 recorder, but I found that I like the Zoom recording. I've never tried FLAC files. Are they better than Wave? So it's a FLAC file, and it's just kind of a lossless audio compression. So if it's kind of like an MP3 with but it's lossless, so you have a little better fidelity and much smaller file sizes. All right, so we see that Cubase Junkies made the live stream. Thanks for joining us. And he has 3 scoops of cinnamon crunch ice cream. That's pretty good. All right, so just see a comment from Redna Music. I think it's a shame that Cubase can do it in a unique way, but when you do it in the studio with fellow producers, we tried it in Cubase, but it's hard. So, a lot of times, it's, Cubase has 3 or 4 ways of doing things, and, and sometimes I think something is hard if you don't know what to do, but, if you know what to do, it's not hard to do, so. So most people I know that are working just, they get paid to get their work done, and, they do quite well. You could check with Jean-Marie on the live stream today. He does quite well. All right, so we see Cubase Junkies just saying, thanks for showing me the imager and reverb method. It's been a big help to me. Appreciate it. You're welcome. So glad that was a great question to ask. Okay, just see from Creative Ideas, please explain how to use samples properly. So it's kind of a broad question, so I'm not sure if you mean like samples like in a sampler for playing instrument, or for having different loops. So let's say if we wanted to do, loops, or we kind of cover a bit of both. So let's say if I just go to loops here, so if I have different samples, let's say. Okay, so once we have samples, we could have these timed, and so if I put this into musical mode, it'll just kind of automatically follow whatever tempo I have. So let's say I wanted to come over here. So I'll just select this and put it into musical mode. And I'll just not have it soloed. So if I just want to take these and put it into musical mode again. So, I mean, you could just kind of drag and drop samples. Now, if I wanted to take a particular sample and drag it into a sampler track and play it. You could just do it like that. But if you know, so but just saying samples is pretty broad. But, you know, it could be like dealing with orchestral samples. So if you could, you know, if you want to have it a little more, you know, focused, just let me know. I'll be happy to kind of show. Okay, reading through more comments. Okay, just finding my spot. Sorry about that. Okay, so we have Graham Witcher just able to join after a stressful day, so we're glad to have you. Okay. So I just see from Kaiwa and Franklin, I'm a little confused. Are there two versions of Pad Motion? I see an option to cross grade from Pad Motion. You know, so it's actually not a Steinberg product. So, you know, we sell it on kind of our, you know, through our distribution channels in the Hallian marketplace, but it's actually, you know, produced by Sample Fuel. So I'm not like an expert in it yet, but I'll reach out to Danny and see if I could have some answers for the next live stream. Okay, so I just see, how do I view all automation on multiple tracks? All right, so let's say I just wanted to come here. Let me just go to quick project here, and I'll do some quick automation. All right, and we'll just revert this quickly. So I'm just gonna just change the setting here. All right. All right, so now if I go hit F6, we can bring up our automation panel. So at this point, we could just say show used, and that will bring up all of the automation that's in the project. So once again, just hit F6, or you could just click right here, and then click on show used. and that will show all the automation parameters in the project. Okay, so we see Cubase Junkie saying, make the kick drum from your couch pillow to Jeff Zabelsky. So my friend Daryl Pearson is a big R&B producer, does tons of work with, he's worked with Michael Jackson and Jodeci and does a lot of stuff with Timbaland and others. He told me one time he was hanging out with Dr. Dre in his studio and he was playing basketball and he's like, man, how'd you get that kick sound? And he just kept bouncing the basketball against the wall in the gym. And he's just like, how'd you get the kick sound? How'd you get the kick sound? He's like, listen. And he's like, what are you talking about? And it was the basketball hitting the wall that he sampled. So. Okay, so we see from Brian Sawyer, Hallian Sonic is not showing up in my instrument list, but installed on my computer. What do I do to get it to show up? So if we just come over here to instruments, so there's could be a couple ways. So it usually shows up under the synth category. So let's say I'll just minimize all. We'll go to synth. And then you should see the Hallian Sonic SE or Hallian Sonic here. So let me just reread it one more time. Okay, so the Hallian Sonic SE, which comes with it. So look under synth, and then you should be able to kind of just simply drag it over and load it up. If you wanted to go to add like VST instrument track, you could say add instrument, and then you come here. You could actually just kind of type it in if you want and see it, and that will kind of filter the results. But if you don't see it initially, look under synth, and then it should be there if it's installed correctly, Brian. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us on the live stream. So I just see a question. Are you using Cubase Pro? I'm not sure if this is to me, but yeah, so that's why I'm using Cubase Pro 11. Okay. All right, so I just see, thanks, Greg, for that response. I will check that out. Unfortunately, mix face instructions indicate to make sure that all MIDI was checked. So if you're using the mix face, if it sounds like it's just a MIDI fader box, that it should be, if it's just like this spit out like CC11 or modulation data, like a fader box, then that should work. But you could also check Daryl just coming up here and say, okay, when you go to, let's say if we have a MIDI track here, you go to the MIDI inserts and you could go to MIDI monitor. And as you move it, see what MIDI messages are actually being transmitted by the device. So if it's set up for, we usually kind of get where it's playing a MIDI note when it's something like a Mackie control device or control surface, or I hit play on my controller and I hear a C3 or something, but check actually to make sure what MIDI information is being transmitted by the device. And if it's just CC, then that shouldn't be playing notes. If it's like MIDI continuous controller, like, modulation or expression, stuff like that. Okay, so we see, is there a big difference between Cubase Artist and Pro? So, there are some different, there are, a number of differences. There's a detailed comparison chart. So I would say Pro is going to have more content, more instruments, more tracks. It does surround sound. It'll do ambisonics. It will have more advanced notation capabilities. So those are some of the things. So that you get, but if you go to the Steinberg website, there's a, compare Cubase versions that will go through a very detailed list of the differences between, Pro Elements, Pro and Artist. All right, so we see from Jay, it'd be awesome if Steinberg hosted a session for System Link based dual system backups so that we could watch a strategy tutorial on it from an IT tech or something to safeguard both systems. I could see if I could get a System Link. I mean, System Link isn't really, intended for backups, so what System Link allows you to do is basically you could have a digital audio connection between two different computers. And once we have a VST System Link set up, we could think of this. And the intention was really that, if you had older computers, you could hook up like a SPDIF cable. And then, if one computer could play 100 tracks and our computer could play 30 tracks, that you could hook up a SPDIF cable and the two would be sample accurately synced. Kind of very much in the thought process of, I want to have, 48 tracks and I have two 24-inch tape machines, so I would synchronize the two. But it's not really doing backup information, and sometimes showing it in a format like this is because it's on two different computers. Sharing two different computer screens in a live stream could be very tricky. But I could see if I could get it set up. So. All right, so we see from Rednet Music, the sampler track is amazing. Most of my students like that feature, chopping, reversing, etc. So yeah, they did a lot of great work with that on Cubase 11. See, Daryl is saying he's looking forward to getting his handwritten lead sheets musically into Cubase so he could share. So can't wait to hear your stuff. All right, so we see JVI needs to check out and spend some time with his daughter, so it's great. Say hi for us. That's more important. So. All right, so we have Sable winners. Drop by to say hi. Make sure you hit the like button too, Sable. So great to see you on the live stream. So you just see when will the next Cubase update be. So, there was probably, if you mean like a maintenance release or a next generational release, we usually don't announce it in advance, but, they're always working on both. Okay, it says, hi, Greg. I have a couple questions. I'm an FL Studio user from past years, and I switched to Cubase Pro, and I'm having trouble adding libraries in Cubase, like Omnisphere, and routing channels freely anywhere. So, if you're, I think, once you have, so I'm not sure if it's a library that you're adding with, with Omnisphere, or if you're just, adding the instrument, but, make sure that you're running it as the 64-bit version. So, because it won't, Cubase, if you have the 32-bit version, you're going to need to use the 64-bit version. And, channels can be freely routed. So if I wanted to, let's say if I have, group channels, let's say if I had a couple group channels, I add, outputs. So once I'm kind of here on the track, I could choose where to do routing to anywhere. But if there's like a specific routing scenario that you can't figure out, let me know. But, the routing is pretty free. And then if I wanted to take like this output to a group, I could, even just go to the sends and say, okay, I wanted this to send to a group. And then if I wanted to send that to group 1, and if I wanted to come over here and say, okay, I want to add an audio track, I could say its input comes from group 1. If we wanted to add like an effects channel that's shared between different tracks, I could select all of my tracks here, say, okay, just wanted to say, okay, I want to take this track, that, and this, and I could right click, and we could add group channels to those selected tracks, or we could also just come here, add an effects channel track, or I could say, okay, I want to take these channels here and, route these, right click, and say I want to add a VCA fader to the selected track. So routing is pretty straightforward, I think. But if there's a specific routing thing that you don't get, just let me know, and I'd be happy to show it to you. All right. Okay, we got a couple minutes left. Let's see. Okay, so just see, I want to buy a Steinberg UR44, but I tend to prefer the Behringer UMC 1820 because of the 8 channels. There's nowhere to put your old UR22. So, if you want an 8-channel interface, check out like the UR816C. So that will allow you to, have onboard DSP, has dedicated drivers, and that will give you eight ins and 8 outs plus an ADAT connection. All right. Can you actually write text in Cubase so that you can read on a screen while singing? So if you wanted to, there is a notepad. So if you go to project to notepad, you could have like all of your text written in there. So I think I have a project where this is kind of set up. Let me find it quickly. So this is how I often will do projects with notepad with lyrics in it where we need to refer to it. So often when I come to like the project notepad, we have a notepad on each track, but I'll also just have a notepad with the lyrics. And we could also have lyrics kind of set up in, as directly here within like markers. So if you need to navigate to particular ones, you could do that quite easily. And you could also do lyrics directly in the score editor. All right, so we see from Sven Isaacson, VST system link was a brilliant idea. Wish Steinberg would update it to work with Ethernet. Yeah, so sometimes getting the sample accurate nature over Ethernet isn't quite as easy as it is with a digital clock reference. All right, so with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. We're just at about 4 hours. So if you want to send questions in advance, please... please send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Want everyone to stay safe and healthy. And we'll be doing another live stream on Tuesday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. Everyone, look forward to seeing everyone on Tuesday. Please stay safe, and we'll see you then. Thank you so much.